I saved for years to buy my dream car, but my sister stole it, totaled it, and tried to ruin my life when I refused to bail her out. Now she's finally facing the consequences. I had just bought my dream car, a 2023 Mustang GT, a few weeks ago. I'd been saving for years, working overtime shifts at the factory and picking up odd jobs here and there. That car wasn't just a vehicle, it was a symbol of everything I'd busted my ass for. Midnight blue, leather seats, the works. I even named her Stella. Yeah, I know, cheesy. But she was perfect. Now, here's the thing. My sister, Sarah, has always been the family's problem child. She's 25, still lives at home, can't hold down a job for more than a few months, and has the most ridiculous sense of entitlement. While I'm out here working my butt off, she's constantly borrowing money or throwing tantrums because our parents don't support her enough. Anyway, last Saturday, I was asleep after pulling a double shift. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to a loud engine revving outside. I figured it was just some drunk neighbor showing off, but then it hit me, that's my car. I bolted to the window, and sure enough, there was Sarah, peeling out of the driveway and Stella like it was a scene from Fast and Furious. My first thought? Maybe I'm dreaming. Second thought? I'm going to kill her. I tried calling her, but of course she didn't pick up. I didn't even have a spare set of keys since I hadn't gotten around to duplicating them yet. So there I was, pacing in my pajamas, furious and helpless. About an hour later, I got a call. It was the police. Mr. Jameson? This is Officer Taylor with the Westwood Police Department. We have your sister, Sarah Jameson, in custody. She was involved in a single-vehicle accident. She's fine, but your car, well, it's totaled. I swear, I almost dropped the phone. Totaled? My heart sank, and my blood was boiling. When I got to the station, there she was, sitting in a holding cell, looking more annoyed than sorry. And that's when she hit me with this gem. Oh my God, Matt! It's not that big of a deal. The insurance will cover it, right? So, there I was, standing in the police station lobby, staring at my sister through the bars of a holding cell. She wasn't crying or scared, like a normal person would be. No, Sarah looked bored. Like she was waiting for someone to come pick her up from soccer practice. Meanwhile, my brand new car, my baby Stella, was in pieces somewhere on the side of a road. Before I could even say anything, my parents showed up. My dad, Rick, was immediately talking to the officers, trying to smooth things over. And my mom, Diane, went straight to Sarah. Mom was already pulling her usual routine, brushing Sarah's hair out of her face and cooing. It's okay, sweetie. We'll fix this. Don't worry. Fix this? I was the one who needed fixing. My car was gone. I just stood there, jaw clenched, waiting for someone to acknowledge the fact that Sarah had just committed grand theft auto and wrecked my $60,000 car. But nope. Apparently, Sarah was the victim here. Dad came over to me and put a hand on my shoulder, all serious. Look, Matt, this isn't the time to get upset. Your sister made a mistake, but the important thing is that she's safe. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. A mistake? She stole my car, totaled it, and you're worried about her feelings? Mom cut in, giving me that classic mom look of disappointment. Matthew, don't make this worse. We're a family. We have to stick together. Sarah didn't mean for this to happen. Didn't mean to? I snapped. She broke into my car, drove it without a license, and crashed it. That's not an accident, that's a crime. Of course, that's when Sarah decided to chime in. Oh, stop being so dramatic, Matt. It's not like you can't just get another car. Insurance exists for a reason, you know. I wanted to scream. Insurance? I just spent my life savings on that car. I hadn't even made my first payment yet. The deductible alone was going to cripple me, and who knew if the claim would even cover the full value. But my parents weren't hearing it. Matt, Dad said, lowering his voice like he was about to drop some profound wisdom. We need to focus on getting Sarah out of trouble. The police are charging her with joyriding, reckless driving, and property damage. She could end up with a record, or worse, in jail. You're her brother. You need to step up and help. Help how? I asked, already knowing I wasn't going to like the answer. Mom jumped in. We need to hire a lawyer. A good one. Someone who can get these charges reduced or dismissed. Your father and I are strapped for cash right now, but you've got a decent savings account, don't you? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You want me to pay for a lawyer? After she destroyed my car? She's your sister, Mom said, like that was supposed to magically erase everything Sarah had done. That's when I made my decision. I wasn't going to pay a single cent for Sarah's mess. No, I said firmly. I'm not helping her. She needs to deal with the consequences of her actions. Maybe this is exactly what she needs to finally grow up. You're being selfish, Mom shouted, her voice echoing through the station. You'd really let your own sister go to jail over a car? A car? It's not just a car. It's everything I've worked for, Mom. She didn't just crash a car, she wrecked my future. Dad tried to calm things down, but I wasn't backing down. If you guys want to help her, go ahead. But don't expect me to bail her out. I'm done cleaning up her messes. Sarah rolled her eyes from behind the bars. Oh, get over yourself, Matt. You're such a drama queen. That was the final straw. I turned on my heel and left the station, ignoring my parents calling after me. I was furious, at Sarah, at my parents, at the whole situation. But more than that, I was determined. If they thought I was going to roll over and let Sarah get away with this, they had another thing coming. The next morning, I woke up to about 10 missed calls and a series of texts from my mom. They all said the same thing. Matt, please come to your senses. Family is more important than material things. Sarah made a mistake. We need to support her. If you refuse to help, she might go to jail. By then, Sarah had already been released on bail, paid for by my parents, of course, and was back home acting like nothing happened. I wasn't about to let her or my parents guilt-trip me into bailing her out of this mess. But I knew this wasn't over. Sure enough, my dad called me about an hour later. Matt, we need to talk. He started, his voice all calm and diplomatic, like he was trying not to set me off. I've got nothing to say, I told him. Sarah stole my car and totaled it. I'm not paying for a lawyer, and I'm not pretending everything's fine. Look, I get that you're upset, Dad said. But this is your sister. You can't just abandon her. She's facing serious charges here. Good, I snapped. Maybe she'll finally learn that actions have consequences. Don't be like this, he said, his tone hardening. We're family, Matt. And families take care of each other. I couldn't believe the nerve. Oh, really? Because I don't remember anyone taking care of me when I spent 3 years saving for that car. Or when I worked double shifts to afford it. Where was all this family loyalty then? Dad sighed like I was the one being unreasonable. Fine. If you're going to be stubborn, don't expect any help from us when you need it. That was rich, coming from the guy who just spent his last dime on Sarah's bail. Don't worry, I said coldly. I'll manage just fine without your help. Then I hung up. I knew my parents were pissed, but I didn't care. I was tired of Sarah getting a free pass every time she screwed up. She needed to learn a lesson, and if my parents weren't going to make it happen, I would. That's when I decided to call my insurance company. I wasn't about to let Sarah or my parents convince me to sweep this under the rug. I told the claims adjuster the whole story, how my sister had stolen the car without my permission, wrecked it, and now expected me to just move on. The guy on the other end of the line was surprisingly sympathetic. Well, Mr. Jameson, he said, this is technically a case of unauthorized use. Since your sister didn't have permission to take the vehicle, it might qualify as theft under your policy. That could work in your favor when it comes to coverage. Theft? I repeated, a slow grin spreading across my face. So you're saying I can file this as a stolen vehicle claim? Potentially, yes, the adjuster said. We'll need a copy of the police report, and any other documentation you have, but it sounds like you have a solid case. I couldn't believe it. For once, something was going my way. I got off the phone and immediately requested a copy of the police report. Sarah wanted to treat my car like her personal joyride? Fine. But she wasn't going to walk away without consequences. That afternoon, I went over to my parents' house to get the keys to Sarah's room. She'd left my spare set of car keys in there after the crash, and I wasn't about to let her keep them as a souvenir. When I walked in, Sarah was sprawled out on the couch, scrolling through her phone like she didn't have a care in the world. Oh, look who decided to show up, she said, smirking. Come to apologize for being such a jerk last night. I ignored her and went straight to Mom, who was in the kitchen. I need the keys to Sarah's room, I said. Mom frowned. Why? What are you planning? She still has my spare keys, I said. I want them back. Mom hesitated, glancing towards Sarah, who was now eavesdropping from the living room. I don't think that's necessary, Matt. She's learned her lesson. I barked out a laugh. Has she? Because she looks pretty comfortable to me. Sarah rolled her eyes. God, you're so dramatic. It's just a car, Matt. That was it. I turned to her and said, It's not just a car, Sarah. It's my life. You wrecked something I worked years for, and you don't even care. But guess what? I filed a claim with my insurance company today. And they're treating this as theft. Her smirk vanished. You what? You heard me. I said. They're treating it as theft. So congratulations, Sarah. You're officially a car thief. Mom gasped. Matt. How could you do that to your sister? How could she do this to me? I shot back. I'm done letting her walk all over me. If the law wants to call her a thief, then so do I. Sarah jumped off the couch, her face red. You can't do that. You're my brother. And you're my sister, I said. But that didn't stop you from stealing my car, did it? For once, she didn't have a snappy comeback. The room went dead silent after I dropped the bombshell about the insurance claim. Sarah looked like she was about to explode, but for once, she had nothing to say. Mom, however, went full meltdown mode. Matthew, this is ridiculous, she cried. You're blowing this way out of proportion. Filing a theft claim against your own sister? Do you know what this will do to her? Yeah, Mom, I said, my voice icy. It'll teach her a lesson for once in her life. Something you and Dad clearly haven't managed to do. Dad walked in at that moment, probably drawn by Mom's yelling. What's going on now? He asked, his tone already exasperated. Matt is trying to ruin Sarah's life, Mom said, flailing her arms like I'd set the house on fire. Oh, I'm the one ruining her life? I snapped. She ruined my car. She ruined my savings. She ruined my trust. But sure, let's make me the bad guy. Dad pinched the bridge of his nose like he was already sick of this conversation. Son, you're being unreasonable. Family doesn't turn on each other like this. No, Dad. I shot back. Family doesn't steal from each other, lie about it, and then expect the victim to just suck it up. If you guys want to keep enabling Sarah, fine. But don't expect me to play along. That's when Sarah finally found her voice. You're such a jerk, Matt. You don't even care about how hard this is for me. I could go to jail because of you. You could go to jail because of you, Sarah, I said, pointing at her. You stole my car. You crashed it. You've never taken responsibility for anything in your life, and I'm done cleaning up your messes. She stormed out of the room, slamming the door to her bedroom so hard the walls shook. Mom gave me a glare that could have melted steel. You should be ashamed of yourself, she said. No, I replied calmly. You and Dad should be ashamed. You raised someone who thinks the world owes her everything. But I'm not playing along anymore. I grabbed my spare keys from the key rack. Turns out Sarah wasn't even smart enough to hide them, and walked out. I didn't care about their angry shouts as I left. I was done. A few days later, I got a call from the insurance company. The adjuster, Greg, sounded hesitant as he spoke. Mr. Jameson, we've reviewed your claim, and we've reached out to the police department for the report. There's just one issue we need to clarify. What kind of issue? I asked, my stomach sinking. Well, according to the officer on the case, your parents paid the bail for your sister. That implies they're supporting her claim that she had permission to use the vehicle. I froze. Permission? I never gave her permission. I understand, Greg said. But the legal stance here is tricky. If there's any suggestion that she had implied consent, for example, if she's driven the car before or if your parents are asserting she had access, it could complicate the theft designation. We might need a statement from you confirming she didn't have permission. My parents had sabotaged me without even realizing it. By bailing Sarah out and acting like her cheerleaders, they'd made it seem like this whole thing was just a family misunderstanding instead of a serious crime. Don't worry, I told Greg. I'll send a written statement and anything else you need. She did not have my permission. But that call lit a fire under me. If my parents were going to interfere, I needed to make sure my side of the story was ironclad. The next day, I took action. First, I called the officer handling Sarah's case and asked if I could provide a more detailed statement. I explained everything, how Sarah had stolen the car in the middle of the night, how she'd driven without a license, and how she treated the whole situation like a joke afterward. The officer listened carefully. "I'll make a note of this," he said. "But you might also want to talk to the prosecutor. If this goes to trial, they'll need all the details you can provide." So, that's exactly what I did. I scheduled a meeting with the prosecutor and laid everything out. I brought photos of my car pre-crash, a copy of the receipt showing the down payment I'd made, and a screenshot of a text Sarah had sent me 2 months ago asking if she could borrow the car, and me saying no. The prosecutor was impressed. "This is solid," she said. "If your sister tries to argue she had permission, this will help disprove that. But you should be prepared, cases like this can get messy, especially when family is involved." Messy? That was putting it lightly. But I didn't care. Sarah had to face the consequences of her actions, even if it meant going up against my own family. When I got home that evening, I had a voicemail from my mom. Her tone was icy. "Matthew, I just got off the phone with Sarah's lawyer. She says you're cooperating with the prosecutor. I cannot believe you're doing this. You're betraying your family over a car. I hope you're happy." I deleted the message without responding. This wasn't about happiness. It was about justice. The next morning, I woke up to find Sarah waiting for me in the parking lot outside my apartment. She was leaning against an old beater of a car, her arms crossed, and her expression made it clear she wasn't there for a friendly chat. "What do you want, Sarah?" I asked, not even trying to hide my irritation. "We need to talk," she said, pushing off the car and walking toward me. "You're seriously ruining my life, Matt. Do you even care what you're doing to me?" I sighed, unlocking my door but not stepping inside yet. "You mean holding you accountable?" "Yeah, I care. That's the whole point." "No, the point is that you're being a spiteful jerk," she snapped. "This isn't about teaching me a lesson. This is about you trying to punish me because you're mad." "You're damn right I'm mad," I shot back. "You stole from me, Sarah. You wrecked my car, and you're acting like it's no big deal. How am I supposed to just let that go?" She threw her hands up in frustration. "I said I was sorry. What more do you want? Blood? An apology doesn't fix this," I said. "You didn't just break my car. You broke my trust. And now you're trying to weasel out of the consequences instead of taking responsibility." "Oh, come on," she said, rolling her eyes. "It's not like I murdered someone. You're treating me like a criminal over one stupid mistake." "Newsflash, Sarah, you are a criminal," I said, my voice rising. "You committed grand theft auto. That's not some little mistake, that's a felony. And if you don't start taking this seriously, things are going to get a whole lot worse for you." She looked like she wanted to argue, but for once, she didn't have a snarky comeback. Instead, she just stared at me for a moment before muttering, "You're unbelievable," and storming off. I stood there for a moment, trying to calm myself down. I hated that it had come to this, but I wasn't backing down. If Sarah wanted to act like a brat, fine. But I wasn't going to let her drag me down with her. A few hours later, I got a call from the prosecutor. "Good news," she said. "The insurance company has officially confirmed the car was taken without your permission. That's going to strengthen the case significantly." "Good," I said. "What happens next?" "Well, Sarah's lawyer is going to push for a plea deal," she said. "But given her attitude and the evidence we have, I'm not inclined to let her off easy. This is a serious offense, and she needs to understand that." I agreed wholeheartedly. Sarah needed to learn that her actions had real consequences, even if it meant she had to spend some time behind bars. When I got off the phone, I felt a strange mix of emotions, relief that things were moving in the right direction, but also a twinge of sadness. No matter how much Sarah had screwed up, she was still my sister. I didn't want her life to be ruined. But at the same time, I couldn't keep letting her ruin mine. Later that evening, Mom called me again. This time, her tone was quieter, almost pleading. "Matt, I know you're upset," she said. "But you don't have to do this. We can find another way to fix this without dragging it through the courts." "There's nothing to fix, Mom," I said. "Sarah made her choices, and now she has to deal with them. You can't keep shielding her forever. You're tearing this family apart," she said, her voice breaking. "No, Mom," I said firmly. "Sarah did that. And if you want to blame someone, blame her, not me." I hung up before she could respond. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was standing up for myself. And it felt good. A week later, I got an email from the prosecutor's office with the court date. Sarah was being officially charged with unauthorized use of a motor vehicle, reckless driving, and property damage. It felt surreal seeing her name on those legal documents. For a moment, I wondered if I'd gone too far, but then I remembered her smug face at the police station, and how she'd laughed off what she'd done. Still, things got more complicated when Dad showed up at my place unannounced. I opened the door to find him standing there with a thermos of coffee and a look on his face like he was gearing up for a lecture. "Dad," I said flatly, "what are you doing here? Can I come in?" he asked, already stepping past me before I could answer. I sighed and closed the door, gesturing for him to sit down. He didn't, though. He just stood in the middle of the room, looking around like he was gathering his thoughts. "Listen, Matt," he started, setting the thermos on my counter. "I didn't come here to argue. I came here to try to make you see reason." "Reason?" I asked, crossing my arms. "What part of this situation seems unreasonable to you? Sarah stole my car, wrecked it, and now she's facing the legal consequences. End of story." "It's not that simple," Dad said, rubbing his temples. "You're talking about your sister here. Your family. Sometimes you have to put personal feelings aside and do what's right for the people you love." "Exactly," I said. "And what's right is letting Sarah learn that her actions have consequences. Coddling her isn't helping, it's making her worse." Dad sighed, like he'd been expecting that answer but still didn't like hearing it. "You don't understand," he said. "Your mother is losing sleep over this. She's worried sick about Sarah. We're all worried." "Oh, I get it," I said. "You're worried about Sarah. But who's worried about me? About the thousands of dollars I'm out? About the fact that I have to start over because of what she did?" He didn't have an answer for that. Instead, he tried a different tactic. "Look, I'll be honest with you," he said. "Your mom and I don't have the money to hire a decent lawyer for Sarah. If this goes to trial, she's going to get stuck with a public defender, and they won't fight as hard for her. She could end up with a felony record. Is that what you want for her?" I stared at him, my jaw tightening. "What I want," I said slowly, "is for Sarah to grow up. To stop leeching off of everyone and acting like the rules don't apply to her. If that takes a felony record, then so be it." Dad looked at me like I'd just slapped him. "You're really willing to let this happen?" he asked. "I didn't let anything happen," I said. "Sarah did this to herself." He stood there for a moment, shaking his head. Then he grabbed his thermos and headed for the door. "I hope you can live with yourself," he said before walking out. When the door closed, I felt a pang of guilt. Not because I thought I was wrong, I still believed Sarah needed to face the consequences, but because I hated how this was tearing my family apart. A few days later, I got another call from the prosecutor. "We've been approached by your sister's lawyer," she said. "They're asking for a plea deal." "What kind of deal?" I asked. "They're willing to plead guilty to misdemeanor unauthorized use of a vehicle in exchange for dropping the other charges," she said. "It's a significant downgrade, but it would still give her a criminal record and require her to pay restitution for the damages." It wasn't the full punishment I thought Sarah deserved, but it was something. "What happens if I don't agree to the deal?" I asked. "Then we proceed to trial," the prosecutor said. "But keep in mind, trials are unpredictable. There's always a chance the jury could go easier on her." I thought about it for a moment. A trial would drag this out even longer, and honestly, I was tired. If Sarah was willing to plead guilty, maybe this would finally knock some sense into her. "All right," I said. "I'll agree to the deal." The prosecutor thanked me, and I hung up, feeling a small weight lift off my shoulders. But I knew this wasn't over yet. I still had to face my family. When I told my parents about the plea deal, they acted like I'd sentenced Sarah to life in prison. "A criminal record?" Mom wailed. "How is she supposed to get a job now? Her whole life is ruined." "She ruined it herself," I said bluntly. "Maybe next time she'll think twice before stealing someone's car." Sarah, of course, refused to speak to me directly. But the night before her court date, I got a text from her. "Thanks for nothing, Matt. You're the worst brother ever." I didn't respond. If she wanted to hate me, fine. At least now she'd think twice before pulling another stunt like this. The court date came quicker than I expected. Sarah showed up with my parents and her lawyer, while I sat on the other side of the courtroom with the prosecutor. She glanced at me once, her eyes full of anger, but I didn't flinch. When the judge asked if she understood the plea deal, Sarah mumbled a yes, her attitude still on full display. She pled guilty to misdemeanor unauthorized use of a vehicle, and the judge ordered her to pay restitution for the damages and complete 200 hours of community service. Afterward, she stormed out of the courtroom without a word. My parents, however, weren't going to let it end quietly. As soon as we were outside, Mom spun on me, tears streaming down her face. "Are you happy now, Matt? Is this what you wanted?" "I wanted her to take responsibility," I said firmly. "And now she has. She'll never forgive you for this," Mom said, shaking her head. "That's fine," I replied. "I'm not here to be her doormat anymore." Mom turned to walk away, muttering, "You're not the son I raised." That one stung, but I stood my ground. This wasn't about them, it was about doing what was right. A week later, Sarah's punishment began. She started her community service at a local park, picking up trash in an orange vest. My parents were furious, of course, acting like she'd been sent to a chain gang. I found out about her first day when Dad called me, his voice dripping with anger. "I hope you're proud of yourself, Matt. Your sister's out there being humiliated because of you." "Because of her," I corrected. "And honestly? Good. Maybe a little humility will do her some good." "You're unbelievable," he snapped. "This isn't what family does." "What family does," I said evenly, "is hold each other accountable. Maybe if you'd done that years ago, we wouldn't be here." He hung up on me. I didn't feel bad about it, though. For once, Sarah wasn't being shielded, and I wasn't going to apologize for that. A few days later, I got an unexpected call, not from Sarah or my parents, but from one of her friends, Kelly. I hadn't spoken to Kelly in years, so I was immediately suspicious when her name popped up on my phone. "Hey, Matt," she said hesitantly. "Can we talk?" "What do you want, Kelly?" I asked, not in the mood for games. "It's about Sarah," she said. "I think she's planning something." That caught my attention. "Planning what?" Kelly sighed. "She's been ranting about how you ruined her life and how she's going to get back at you. I don't know exactly what she's up to, but she keeps saying she's not going to let you win." I clenched my jaw, already regretting answering the call. "Thanks for the heads up, Kelly. I'll handle it. Just be careful," she said before hanging up. Now I was on edge. Sarah had already proven she was reckless, but if she thought she could retaliate against me, she was about to find out just how serious I could get. A few days after Kelly's warning, I started noticing weird things. First, my mailbox was stuffed with junk flyers and subscription offers I hadn't signed up for. Then, I got an alert from my credit card company about an attempted charge for $1,500 at an electronics store. Thankfully, it was flagged as suspicious and declined. It didn't take a genius to figure out who was behind it. Sarah was trying to mess with me, and she wasn't being subtle about it. I called her immediately, skipping the pleasantries. "What the hell are you doing, Sarah? What are you talking about?" she said, her voice dripping with fake innocence. "Don't play dumb," I snapped. "I know you're behind the credit card scam and the junk mail. Grow up and stop acting like a spoiled kid." She let out a bitter laugh. "Oh, please. You think I care enough to waste my time on you? Maybe if you hadn't been such a vindictive prick, you wouldn't have to worry about your precious credit card." "Keep it up," I said, my voice ice cold. "You're already on thin ice with the law. You really want to add fraud to the list?" She hung up on me, but the message was clear: this wasn't over. I spent the next few hours freezing my accounts, changing passwords, and filing a report with my credit card company. As annoying as it was, I wasn't going to let her win. If Sarah thought she could scare or exhaust me into dropping everything, she had no idea what she was up against. Later that night I got a text from my dad. "You've made your point, Matt. Stop being petty and let this go before you destroy what's left of this family." I didn't bother responding. At this point, my family's opinion of me was the least of my worries. A few days later, things escalated. I came home from work to find a notice taped to my apartment door. It was from my landlord, warning me about noise complaints. Apparently, someone had been calling in fake reports, claiming I was throwing parties and blasting music at all hours of the night. I knew exactly who was behind it. I immediately called my landlord to clear things up, but the frustration was building. This wasn't just petty nonsense anymore. Sarah was actively trying to make my life miserable. That evening, I decided I'd had enough. I gathered every piece of evidence I had, screenshots of the credit card alerts, the junk mail, and now the noise complaint notice. I also made a detailed timeline of her behavior since the crash, down to the ridiculous comments she'd made at the police station. The next day, I took it all to the prosecutor handling her case. "Ms. Doyle," I said, handing over the documents, "I think Sarah is retaliating against me for cooperating with you. She's been trying to sabotage my life ever since this started." The prosecutor flipped through the papers, her expression growing more serious with each page. "This is harassment," she said. "And if she's committing fraud on top of it, we're looking at additional charges." "Good," I said. "Because I'm done putting up with it." She nodded. "Let me make some calls. If she's violating any conditions of her plea deal or bail, we'll address it immediately." I walked out of her office feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and exhaustion. Sarah wanted a war, but I wasn't going to let her destroy my life just because she was too immature to accept responsibility. If she thought she was untouchable, she was about to get a rude awakening. A couple of days later, I got a call from the prosecutor. Her tone was firm, almost grim. "Mr. Jameson, we've reviewed the evidence you provided, and we've verified some of the incidents with third parties. Your sister's actions are a clear violation of her plea agreement." "What does that mean?" I asked, already bracing for the answer. "It means we're filing a motion to revoke her plea deal," she said. "Her harassment and attempted fraud show a pattern of behavior that demonstrates she hasn't taken this process seriously. If the motion is approved, we'll reinstate the original charges." I was stunned. "So, she could actually go to jail?" "Yes," she replied. "But that depends on the judge. There's also the option for stricter conditions, like mandatory counseling or a more substantial fine. Either way, she'll be facing more severe consequences." Part of me felt bad. This wasn't just a slap on the wrist anymore. But another part of me, the part that had been dealing with her nonsense for weeks, felt vindicated. The prosecutor added, "You'll likely need to testify in the hearing. Can we count on you for that?" "Absolutely," I said without hesitation. When I got off the phone, I thought about calling my parents to let them know what was coming. But then I stopped myself. They'd made their position clear, and I knew they'd just blame me for Sarah's actions. Sure enough, later that evening Mom called. "Sarah just told us the prosecutor's filing new charges against her," she said, her voice shaking. "Is this your doing?" "Sarah did this to herself," I said evenly. "Maybe if you hadn't coddled her all her life, she wouldn't think she can get away with everything." "Don't you dare blame us," she snapped. "You could have stopped this if you just let it go." "I'm not letting it go," I said firmly. "I told you before, this is on her, not me. And I'm done playing the scapegoat in this family." Mom didn't have a response for that. She just muttered something under her breath and hung up. For the first time in weeks, I felt a strange sense of peace. The wheels were turning, and Sarah was finally facing the full consequences of her actions. No more excuses, no more cover-ups, just reality. The hearing to address Sarah's plea violation was scheduled for the following week, and as the date approached, my phone wouldn't stop blowing up. My parents alternated between angry texts and guilt-tripping voicemails, trying to get me to back down. "Matt, think about what you're doing. Sarah's your sister. You're tearing this family apart over a car. What's wrong with you? This isn't who you are. Drop this before it goes too far." I ignored every message. I'd already told them where I stood, and I wasn't about to be dragged into another pointless argument. When the day of the hearing arrived, the courtroom had a tense energy. Sarah sat next to her lawyer, looking more anxious than I'd ever seen her. Gone was the cocky attitude, replaced by a nervous fidgeting as the judge entered the room. The prosecutor laid everything out: the junk mail, the fraudulent credit card attempt, the harassment with noise complaints, all of it tied directly to Sarah. As each piece of evidence was presented, Sarah's face got paler. When it was my turn to testify, I kept it simple and factual. "I didn't want it to come to this," I said. "But Sarah's actions have been relentless. She's made it clear she has no intention of taking responsibility or respecting the boundaries of the plea deal. This isn't about revenge, it's about protecting myself from her behavior." When I finished, Sarah's lawyer tried to spin things, arguing that Sarah had acted out of frustration and hadn't intended to cause harm. But the judge wasn't buying it. "You were given a chance to resolve this with minimal consequences," the judge said, his tone stern. "Instead, you chose to escalate the situation, showing a complete lack of remorse. That leaves me with little choice." He reinstated the original charges: unauthorized use of a motor vehicle, reckless driving, and property damage. On top of that, Sarah was ordered to complete an additional 100 hours of community service, attend mandatory counseling sessions, and pay a larger restitution amount, including covering some of my legal fees. Sarah's face crumpled as the judge delivered his verdict. My parents, sitting behind her, looked furious, but they didn't even glance my way. After the hearing, I walked out without saying a word to them. I didn't need their approval, and I certainly wasn't going to apologize for standing up for myself. Later that evening, I got a single text from Sarah. "You win. Are you happy now?" I stared at the message for a long time before replying. "This wasn't about winning, Sarah. It was about accountability. Maybe now you'll finally understand what that means." She didn't respond. But for the first time in years, I felt like I'd finally broken the cycle. The days following the hearing were strangely quiet. No calls, no texts, nothing from Sarah or my parents. At first, it was a relief. I didn't have to deal with their constant guilt trips or blame. But as the silence stretched on, it started to feel odd. About a week later, I got a call from Kelly, Sarah's friend. "Hey, Matt," she said cautiously. "I just wanted to check in on you. Have you heard from Sarah?" "No," I said, already on edge. "Why?" Kelly hesitated. "She's been weird. Like really quiet. She hasn't been talking to anyone, and she deleted all her social media accounts. I know she's mad at you, but this feels like something else." That threw me off. Sarah wasn't the type to disappear. If anything, she loved attention, even negative attention. "Have you seen her?" I asked. "Not in a few days," Kelly admitted. "She didn't show up for her last community service shift either." That last part hit me like a punch to the gut. If Sarah was skipping her community service, that could land her in even more trouble. After hanging up with Kelly, I debated whether to reach out to Sarah directly. I didn't want to, but if she was spiraling, ignoring it could make things worse, for both of us. Finally, I sent her a text. "Hey. Kelly told me you've been MIA. Are you okay?" No response. Hours passed, and still nothing. The next day, I decided to stop by my parents' house. When I pulled into the driveway, I noticed something odd. Sarah's car wasn't there. That was unusual, since she barely left the house unless she had to. When I knocked on the door, Mom opened it, her face immediately hardening. "What are you doing here?" "I'm looking for Sarah," I said, ignoring her tone. "Kelly said she hasn't been around. Is she here?" Mom crossed her arms. "You've done enough, Matt. If Sarah doesn't want to talk to you, that's her choice." I stepped closer to the door. "Mom, this isn't about me or what happened in court. I just want to know if she's okay." She hesitated, glancing over her shoulder like she was hiding something. "She's fine. She just needs some space." "Space?" I said, narrowing my eyes. "What does that even mean? Where is she?" "Matthew, I don't owe you an explanation," she snapped, trying to close the door. I blocked it with my foot. "If something's wrong, I need to know." She glared at me but finally relented. "She left," Mom said, her voice tight. "She said she needed to get away for a while, so she's staying with a friend. She doesn't want to see you." Something about the way she said it didn't sit right with me, but I let it go, for now. If Sarah really had left, I needed to figure out where she was and what she was doing. Because the last thing I wanted was for her to drag herself into an even deeper hole. After leaving my parents' house, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Mom's tone, her evasiveness, it didn't add up. Sarah might have been mad at me, but her going completely off the grid wasn't like her. She thrived on drama and attention, and even when she was mad, she wanted everyone to know about it. I decided to do some digging. The first place I started was her social media accounts, or what was left of them. Kelly wasn't kidding. Sarah had deleted almost everything. No posts, no stories, no updates. Just a blank, inactive profile. That alone didn't tell me much, but it gave me an idea. I called Kelly back. "Do you know which friend she's staying with?" I asked. "No," Kelly said, sounding genuinely concerned. "She didn't tell me anything, Matt. I thought maybe she'd gone to your parents' cabin or something." My stomach dropped. The cabin. My family owned a small cabin up in the mountains, about 2 hours away. It was old, drafty, and barely had cell service, but it was the kind of place Sarah went to when she wanted to sulk or avoid reality. Without saying anything else, I hung up and got in my car. The drive to the cabin felt longer than usual. As I climbed higher into the mountains, the uneasy feeling in my chest grew stronger. By the time I pulled up to the driveway, my hands were gripping the steering wheel so tightly they ached. The cabin looked deserted at first. No lights, no movement, just the faint sound of the wind in the trees. But then I spotted it, Sarah's car, parked haphazardly off to the side, half hidden behind some bushes. I got out of the car and approached the front door. It was unlocked. "Sarah?" I called out, stepping inside. The place was dark and quiet, with that musty smell it always had when it hadn't been used in a while. I checked the living room, the kitchen, the tiny bathroom. Nothing. Then I heard it, a faint noise coming from one of the bedrooms. I pushed the door open and found her sitting on the floor, leaning against the bed frame. Her eyes were puffy, her face pale, and she was holding an empty bottle of something I couldn't quite make out in the dim light. "Sarah!" I rushed over to her, kneeling down. "What the hell are you doing? Are you okay?" She groaned, her voice barely above a whisper. "Go away, Matt." "Not happening," I said, grabbing the bottle out of her hand. It was a bottle of cheap whiskey, almost completely drained. I looked around and saw a small pile of crumpled tissues and some empty snack wrappers. It looked like she'd been here for days. "You're a mess," I said, trying to keep the anger out of my voice. "Why didn't you call someone?" "Why would I?" she muttered. "You all hate me anyway." I froze. For all her bravado and attitude, I'd never heard her sound so defeated. "Nobody hates you," I said, softening my tone. "But you can't keep doing this, Sarah. You can't just run away and hide every time things get hard." She didn't respond, just stared at the floor. "Come on," I said, standing up. "You're coming back with me. We'll figure this out, but you can't stay here like this." To my surprise, she didn't fight me. She let me help her up, and for the first time in weeks, she didn't have a single sarcastic comment to throw my way. As we drove back down the mountain, I couldn't help but wonder if this was the wake-up call she needed, or just the beginning of another storm. The drive back was quiet. Sarah stared out the window the entire time, her face blank. She looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept in days. I didn't press her to talk. I figured she needed some time to sort out whatever was going on in her head. When we got back to my apartment, I set her up on the couch with a blanket and a bottle of water. "You're staying here tonight," I said firmly. "You need rest, and I need to know you're not off somewhere drinking yourself into oblivion." She didn't argue, just nodded weakly. The next morning, she was a little more alert. She sat at the kitchen table while I made coffee, her hands wrapped around the mug like it was the only thing holding her together. "I don't know why I came back," she said finally, breaking the silence. "Maybe because you know you can't do this alone," I said. She snorted, but it wasn't her usual sarcastic laugh. It was quieter, almost bitter. "You're probably the last person I should be around after everything." "Maybe," I admitted. "But you're here. So now what?" She didn't answer right away, just stared into her coffee. Finally she said, "I screwed up, Matt. I know I did. I didn't think it would get this bad. That's what happens when you don't deal with things," I said. "They pile up until they're too big to ignore." She nodded slowly. "I don't even know where to start." "You start by owning it," I said. "No more running away, no more blaming other people. You face what you've done and you fix it." Her eyes filled with tears, and for the first time in a long time, she looked like the little sister I used to know, the one who wasn't buried under layers of entitlement and anger. The next step was facing my parents. When I called them to let them know Sarah was with me, Mom's relief quickly turned into frustration. "So you're the hero now?" she said bitterly. "This isn't about me," I said. "It's about getting Sarah back on track. If you want to help, great. But if you're going to keep enabling her, stay out of the way." Mom didn't respond, but later that day, she and Dad showed up at my apartment. The tension in the room was suffocating, but for once, Sarah didn't hide behind them. "I messed up," she said, cutting them off before they could start defending her. "I know I've been awful, and I know I don't deserve another chance. But I'm going to try to fix this." It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was a start. Over the next few weeks, Sarah started to show signs of real change. She didn't just complete her community service, she put in extra hours. She enrolled in a counseling program and even got a part-time job to start paying back the restitution. My parents were hesitant at first, still wanting to shield her, but they eventually backed off when they saw she was finally taking responsibility. As for me, I kept my distance emotionally but stayed involved enough to support her progress. I wasn't ready to forgive her completely, but I could see she was trying, and that was more than I ever expected. In the end, Sarah's actions nearly tore our family apart, but they also forced us to confront the toxic patterns we'd been ignoring for years. It wasn't a perfect ending, but it was the first step towards something better. And while I'll probably never get over what she did to my car, I can at least say this: for the first time, I believe Sarah might actually learn from her mistakes.